Hello and good afternoon, and welcome to the panel on policy and regulation. I would like to start the panel by saying that this is way much more than only a policy panel. It's about possibility. And we heard this morning the keynote speeches, the inspiration, the transformation, the change of society that FTTH brings. Here we are going to talk about the framework that either enables that or that we need to work on how to improve it so that it could enable it. And it's going to be a very interactive panel. We'll open up the floor quite early because we want also to hear your views, your comments, your questions. What keeps you up at night in terms of your business and how regulation and policy can help you. I'm Artur Salksnis. I'm Public Affairs Director at FTTH Council Europe. And it's my pleasure and honor to introduce a really splendid panel, beginning with Lucrezia Buza, Head of Unit for Markets and Competition and Roaming at the DG Connect within the European Commission. Pleasure to have you here. Next, we have Robert Murick, representing the regulatory authorities, chairperson of Ireland's Commission for Communication Regulation, ComReg, and also BEREC chair for this year. BEREC, of course, stands for Body of European Regulators for Electronic Communications. Then we are having the pleasure of having Francesco Nonno, our Vice President responsible, FTTH Council Europe Vice President responsible for public affairs, but of course who is also Director of Regulatory and European Affairs at Open Fibre, so bringing the Italian experience here. From Iliad, we welcome Ingrid Malfait-Guibaud, Director of EU Affairs. Good to have you here, Ingrid. And finally, we have Pascal Rogard, Executive Director of Orange Brussels office. Real pleasure to have you here. To kick off the panel, I will ask all the panelists to start with short introductory statements, bringing in some ideas. And Lucrezia, maybe let's start with you. And in the room, definitely we have a mix of people who are regulatory and policy experts who are scrutinizing every single word what's coming out from the European Commission. It's their bread and butter, so to say. But then we also have lots of people who might simply come to the panel, to this session and want to understand why policy and regulation matter and how it can help. And in that sense, there are lots of policy initiatives that have come out from the European Commission recently. Lots has been announced for this year. What would be the main key takeaways that you would, well, not takeaways, but main points that you would like to stress to kick off the debate?
Yeah, thanks, and good afternoon, everyone. Indeed, now I'm a bit scared for everything I say will be scrutinized fully, but I'm happy to share a bit also our reflections in the Commission in Brussels on what we see in terms of future policy interventions that could be particularly important to support and foster connectivity. That is a common goal here for on the policymaker side, but also, I guess, of all the presence in the room, either from a business perspective or from a citizen's perspective. That's what we want. And as policymakers, what is important for us is we have a different toolbox or different regulatory tools that we can use, or different policy initiatives. And the good point, the key question for us is how to use how to leverage all these tools. Because we consider that it's important on the one hand to foster investments, and for which a return on investment is important. On the other hand, we also see the importance of competitive pressure when it comes to investment decisions. So it's really about how to play with these two, not to play actually, how to really leverage and how to use these two instruments. And in doing that, we do informed policy choices. So we look at what has been done in the past, what has worked in the past, and we try to also draw best lessons learned, best practices at European level. Now, this is a very difficult thing to do because there are the markets are very different in the different member states, And I think the speakers also who spoke before today, they highlighted what the national specificities are and what worked in the different things that worked in certain contexts compared to others. Something that I can say that from a European perspective, we see that is very important when supporting the deployment of very high capacity networks, in particular fiber, is access to infrastructure. This was very important. And this was something that has guided the Commission policy choice of putting forward the GIA, the Gigabit Infrastructure Act proposal, when access to building is key. It is key to facilitate permitting. It is key to also ensure that new buildings are done in a way that facilitates the deployment of digital networks as well. And what we are looking at is very early on to see how this initiative will deliver, but it's something that we look at and that we'll see whether there is a need to complement and do further things in this remit, in particular by using the guidelines that both BEREC is working on together with the Commission. And another important thing when it comes to access to civil infrastructures is also the work that regulators have been doing in granting this access, either by defining civil infrastructures as a separate market or by using the Market 1, the market for wholesale local access, and using access to civil infrastructure as an additional remedy. There's something that in different contexts, for the interest of time, I'm not explaining all the cases of where this has worked, but in different member states has proven to be delivered. Also, an important thing that is similar to GIA is also symmetric regulation that has worked well in some countries, sometimes in combination with asymmetric regulation, so on the incumbents. So all of these are for sure lessons learned on which we are going to reflect. The second element is in our gigabit recommendation already, and is the fostering of price flexibility for the deployment of very high capacity networks as well. These are the two elements that have, let's say, worked well. We are now reviewing the code, so we will look at interest also at things that have either not created a lot of interest. For instance, the co-investment provision that we have has not been used so much, and we need to see how to eventually improve that. And there is also a more general a more general reflection on how to use regulation. You know that we are going also to publish a reviewed recommendation on the regulated markets, and this will be, as usual, based on the evidence that we find. And in this process, we will also see how the market works, how regulation in the past has delivered, and what needs to be done also for the future. And in the interest of time, I think I will stop here and leave the floor also to the other panelists.
And we'll definitely come back to several of the points that you mentioned. Robert, let me turn to you now. And with both your BEREC and COMREG hats on, how do you see the role of the regulators and how you can contribute to and support the FTTH rollout and adoption while keeping the markets competitive? And what's the role of the regulators in this whole business?
Your question has a certain premise in it, and the premise seems to be that at the moment the regulation doesn't support the rollout of fiber. And
how you can even further support.
I think what you have seen over the last 10, 12 years is an awful amount of fiber being rolled out in lots of countries. In Portugal, in Spain, they're nearly at 100%, if not more. France is a good example where an awful lot of fiber has been rolled out. Sweden, there are some notable exceptions, of course, but they have their specific national circumstances. We talk a lot about Germany, but we often forget that Germany has got an actually relatively speaking, a very good functioning copper network, that kind of negates the demand a little bit for fiber. So there are national specificities, but we have over the last 15 years been promoting fiber investment as regulators. If I talk about my own market, in Ireland, for example, we have made sure that the price regulation that you normally have for the old copper networks doesn't apply to fiber, and that created a real investment boom. I think in a couple of years we will have 100% fiber coverage in Ireland. So I think, first of all, the results of the current framework are not bad at all, and I'd like to say that. So we don't want, if we're thinking about a new regulation, to throw the baby out with the bathwater and actually create more upheaval and create a worse situation than we had. But having said that, we've had the current framework for the last 20 years. It was designed to help markets go from a monopolistic market to a competitive market. And we have withdrawn regulation in most sub-markets, not yet what we call the WLA market, basically the fixed market. We should look at that, and we should see if there are better tools available. Also because it will take a few years to get all this regulation through the machinery in Brussels. So I definitely agree with looking at whether the current framework will be fit for purpose in the future. What I would like to say is that if you ask me personally, and what bothers me, it is the fact that it will always be an oligopolistic market. It will always be a market with only a few networks and a few providers. And the risk of, in an oligopolistic market, of from a competitive point of view, something going wrong is always there. So I wouldn't mind having tools that are perhaps less programmatic, and with SMP you put a special status on one operator and then you regulate it. It might perhaps be better to have tools that are a bit quicker so that you can deregulate a bit, but you can intervene very quickly if you see something goes wrong. That would be an idea that I would like. Also, there always will remain bottlenecks, and one of the bottlenecks that we have in Ireland, but I think it's the same in many other countries, is that of passive infrastructure. That is also something that we need to look at, that everyone has the ability to build a competing network if they want to. So there are definitely things to do, but I think the current framework has not done badly at all for investment. I think if there's another thing that we don't have as telecom regulators that you see some other regulators, for example, in the energy market do have, is tools to stimulate market demand. Because if we can, of course, build and then hope that people come, I think in some countries it's actually the demand side that is going to be the more problematic end of the spectrum. Thanks.
Thank you, Robert. Francesco, let me turn to you now. You are also, just like Robert, a man with two hats on this panel, both Vice President for Public Affairs in the Council, but also with your Italian perspective. If you look at the regulatory framework, and Robert just now invited us to look whether it's fit for future, what's your view? What's your assessment of the regulatory and policy framework, and what could be perhaps improved?
Thank you. I begin with agreeing with the last speaker on the fact that the current regulatory framework delivered a very positive framework for investment in Europe. We experienced a lot of new companies or companies not active in telecommunications infrastructure investing in fiber, and they've pioneered the investment in Fibre, these companies in Europe, and till now, they account for about 60% of the overall investment. So it's something which helped a lot to get to the 74% of coverage we reached in Europe, even if differences among member states are quite relevant still. So the overall framework, it has been a good framework, and the issue we are seeing in the last, I'd say, 1-2 years is that investment is slowing down. Now, we have seen figures in our investment committee and the investment tracker we publish every year with declining investment in fiber. And this is due to the fact that return on investment is declining. And since return on investment is declining, investors are much less keen to put money in this industry. Therefore, we have to check why this is happening. And the main reason, not the only, but the main reason today is take-up. There are a number of countries in which take-up is too slow, and a slow take-up doesn't support the investment case. So the investors are refraining from investing anymore. That's the first thing we should take care of, and we should find a regulatory framework which continues to incentivize investment, because otherwise we may have I'd say differently from the previous speaker, we have a very few cases of excellent results and a lot of cases where we are stuck in the middle with a lot of investment done, but not a good return on investment. So apart from a few cases, we risk to stop the history going, to stop the fiber deployment. So which are the relevant things? Of course, we need to facilitate deployment of fiber. So all the activity on the GIA is very well welcome, and in particular the coherent application in member states. Also, the guarantee that we have enough spectrum for in-home connectivity, it's another relevant issue for this activity. But probably the single most relevant thing that we may, and we do ask the Commission to support, is copper switch off. Copper switch off is probably the single measures that on one side can help take up, on the other side can help investors secure their investment case, reducing the downsides that they may face. So if you know that by a certain date your network will be used, that's a relevant point, that you don't need more public funds probably to complete coverage. You can get there with private investment. So that's very important to go in that direction, in particular in countries where take-up is very slow. The other relevant point, on which we have quite a disagreement with the Commission, or at least with the intention the Commission is publicly declaring, is the review of the list of relevant markets. We think it's too soon for so much flexibility and for having a complete deregulation unless we get a very specific situation in which member state may still going through a quite complex process, but may decide to intervene and regulate. And here I bring my Italian experience, where even if we are still regulated, incumbent has got quite a lot of flexibility in pricing. And how did it use? No? When you have flexibility in price, what do? But probably you expect someone to increase prices where costs are higher. So to have a better investment case for expanding the network or things like that. No. What we had, and unfortunately the National Regulatory Authority also approved the measure, so we are now discussing curves, but apart from the curves, what we got is that they decided that the price would be lower if at the same premises there is a competitor, and is higher if there is no competitor. This is also in the same city, in the same street. Here there is a competitor, it costs 10. Here there is not a competitor, it costs 12. Now, I don't think that flexibility is for that, was intended for that. And I fear that if we deregulate, we will get even worse situation. So before going in that direction, I would ask the Commission to listen to the market. This morning, I heard CEOs of Iliad, the Director General of Free, and the CEO of Vodafone Portugal advocating for not modifying the list of relevant market. It's not normal that CEOs enter into such detailed regulatory decision. I think that the Commission should really listen to what we all are telling them about this choice, because this may be a very adverse choice for those who already invested and are thinking to invest. Predictability is very relevant in this market. And if people invested on the basis of a certain regulatory framework, modifying the list of relevant market, it does not go in the direction of predictability. So I'd really ask the Commission to try to modify this approach. And just one last point. It is important to consider that moving from copper to fiber has a relevant effect on sustainability, and in particular on energy consumption. It is important that in the dialogue with the Commission, we may be able to qualify the fiber networks in the taxonomy, because this is also something which can help a lot the investment case. Thank you. I stop here.
Thank you, Francesco. Ingrid, since Francesco reminded about the very interesting speech we heard earlier, also representing Iliad's point of view, I'm sure you contributed to the briefing, at least on the regulatory side, maybe not, but at least, I mean, what are the key points, what you would like to bring in as first initial thoughts about regulation and how it can help your business thrive?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Very happy to be here. Yeah, I think I will maybe repeat some of the words that Francesco said, and no problem. It's good to be aligned. It's good, I think, that several big actors are aligned on the same issues. I think I would insist on maybe one or two points, and I will be quick. The FTTH market and the telecom market in general, they operate on long investment cycles. And for that, it was said, but I need to insist, we need regulatory stability and predictability. So we understand that every 5 years, a new commission is arrives with fresh ideas, and we're going to review things. But I think we should not underestimate the effect this kind of review can have also on business decisions, and this can create also kind of attendees, because everyone is saying, okay, what's going to happen? And so we are a bit concerned to see that today everything seems open. I mean, even the basis of the regulatory model, of the EU model, seems to be open. We say, okay, is it still relevant or not? I mean, so it has been 2 years that we have at least discussed that. And I think at the end, nobody came with a magic solution. So probably the answer is that the framework is still good enough. I think that's our conviction, that it's flexible enough, that it allows, I mean, regulatory remedies where it is necessary to have, and no regulation where it's not necessary, where a competition is vibrant enough. And so, yeah, we think it has worked very well, so it should preserve, and we think the Commission should be courageous enough to resist to this strong incumbents push for deregulation that we think has no real ground, in fact, because even incumbents, they manage to have deregulation in some countries. I mean, many countries have started to deregulate, and in some other cases, they are access seekers in other countries, so they need this regulation. So at the end, I think it works. I mean, we don't see the reasoning why it should be open again. Okay, we heard that it was made for copper, now we are on fiber, but in fact it's not true, because when the code was discussed and conceived, fiber was already there. We invented this concept of VHCN to take into account fiber. So this reason is not the good reason. So I failed to find, in fact, what is the real motivation to revise everything, to revise something that is working well. And what else I wanted to say? Yeah, on what is very important to keep is, of course, access to fixed networks. We think this is the core of the situation. I mean, of the market, and effective access is essential to all operators to build convergent offers. Effective access means ideally long-term access right, visibility on tariff evolution, opportunities for co-investment, and in fact it is a little bit what the French model has brought. Because we are convinced also that a shared network model is more efficient, not everywhere, but I mean in many areas, than a fragmented market with many operators. So I think an open access model is very interesting. Last point is also still about access to physical infrastructure. I wanted to come back on that. Very important as well. I mean, you said it, whether it is market one or specific market, we don't know, but for sure GI is not enough in our view. For the basic reason is that once you have deployed a FTTH network, then the physical infrastructure that you have used is an essential one. I mean, you cannot switch to another one, or you have to just destroy your fiber and build another one using this alternative physical infrastructure. So this physical infrastructure, access to civil engineering, is essential and will continue to be essential on the long term, very, very long term, in fact. So that's also a point I wanted to make.
Thank you, Ingrid. Pascal, let me turn to you. You are based in Brussels, so in that sense, you are at the forefront of Orange's efforts to convey the viewpoint of your company to the European Commission and other European institutions. What are the key arguments when you outline Orange Group's position on regulatory and policy issues?
Okay, thank you for the question, and happy to be there as well. The main question for us is how we can incentivize best investment. And I agree with Robert that the regulatory environment has indeed been very positive to move from a monopolistic to a competitive market. It's what you said, and I really think you are completely right. The question now is, and you mentioned it as well, what are the right tools to address the market and to make sure that operator will continue to invest. By the way, it was a big success, but in the meantime, the Commission says that there is a gap of 200 billion euro of investment in order to achieve the digital decade target. So it was a success, but maybe we were not able to go as far as we should have gone. That's the first point. The second point is indeed the tools, the regulatory tools. If you invest and that you know that you have an asymmetric regulation, that you are obliged to open your network, cost-oriented, you may refrain yourself to do that because you are not sure that you will get the money back that you have invested. So the situation should be really scrutinized regarding the level of competition. And I think that in many countries, in many member states now, we have a mature market in terms of competition. For instance, in France, we are and it's a big success of the, I would say, previous regulation. It has brought us, to a very competitive functioning of the market with very low prices for the customers. The thing is that sometimes these very low prices are making us not very profitable and prevent us to invest at the level that we would like to do it. So there is, for me, a need to update the tools that the regulators are using, and there is no one model fitting for all. For instance, in France, we had the symmetric regulation. In Spain, we were more based on something which was based on the BB cost directive. It was a directive, now it's a regulation. You have other part of the, in member state where you had other way to address. Once again, the good result is that indeed we move from a monopolistic to a competitive market. And now I think it's time to be confident in the commercial traction of the competitors in order to invest, not only to roll out the network, but also to invest to upgrade the network, to put AI in the network, to develop another target of the digital decade. It's 10,000 edge nodes. So we have to be able to manage the way we want to develop our networks. Today, we are a little bit more too regulatory driven to do that. But I don't say that, of course, everything should go. We should, and I think it's very important that the regulator keep in their hand when there is a need. I don't know who referred to bottlenecks, but I think if there is a bottleneck, if it's demonstrated that there is a bottleneck, then indeed the regulator should be able to intervene. And I think it's a task of the Commission to define when, where, and with which tools this bottleneck should be addressed. Maybe a last remark is about the impact of all the regulatory framework as it is now. We have obligation of reporting on many data, and frankly speaking, I'm not completely convinced that the NRA are able to use even all the data that they are asking us. So here I would quote what Madame Virkunen is saying, simplification and really focusing on what is essential and what will make sure that the market will function in an efficient way, and to assess the situation according to the level of competition. If there is a good level of competition, then we should certainly relax a lot the regulation. If it's not the case, then we can use this exceptional tool, which could be, I don't know, I heard the name of safety net. I don't know if it will be the right element, but anyway, it's what we believe.
Thank you very much, Pascal. Lucrezia, let me turn to you again, because when we constructed this panel, we really wanted to ensure that there is divergence of views represented among the panelists. And when you listen to this, the first introductory statements, you know, there are questions, is everything open now? Or there are remarks saying, oh, this should be the task of the Commission and so on. What do you take from all this, and what your comments would be?
I think by listening to the other speakers in the panel, I think we have a lot of tasks going in possibly more or less different directions, but so let's say the job is not going to be easy for us, but okay, we are used to that. Something that I would start from is surely the fact in which I think we all agree is that the framework has worked well, also because there is there are different players in the different markets, which was the aim why we moved from a situation where 20 and more years ago we were in a monopolistic of the incumbent situation. Indeed, things have changed. We will need to see whether the tools that we have are effective in tackling the remaining challenges, the market changes as well. The more and more the notifications that we receive from national authorities relate to smaller market than national markets. For instance, it's often the situation that you have different players in the market, and therefore we really need to see whether the framework that was thought for an incumbent of having a monopolistic position is still up to date. This being said, of course, all the decisions or all the regulatory decisions that we take will be data-driven and evidence-based, and this is why also we started consultations already. There are studies ongoing. There will be further consultations afterwards. And when it comes, for instance, to one of the instruments that was mentioned before, which is the recommendation on the relevant markets, the final decision of the Commission will be a result of the different, of the evidence that we gather during during this period. In doing that, it is interesting indeed to see that the same companies can be either access seekers or access givers in the different markets. So that's good, because that means that the feedback that we'll receive will be comprehensive and objective, because every company could see itself also in a different situation from the one in which it is currently is. Just to say that in the recommendation we passed from 20 markets to 2 currently, so this is also a sign of success. But this doesn't prevent national regulatory authorities also to regulate in the case they believe that there is a need to take remedies also beyond these 2 current markets, and they do. We still receive notifications also for other markets. And what is different is that then the burden is on the national regulatory authority to prove to the Commission that there is such a need based on the 3 criteria test. This is so there is still the possibility for NRAs to adopt regulation even in those cases, and we have the evidence now that are not for those markets that are not included in the list of recommended markets at European level. Then I also have seen I noted down also the need for simplification, and this is indeed one of the most important objectives for the future policy making and the regulatory activities also for the Commission as a whole, but including in this sector. This is why we are reviewing also the provisions of the code to identify what has worked, what didn't, and what could be improved. That's something there that is on which we are working. And then it's important, and then I noted down also the problem of take-up. And also, as Robert was saying, the need to stimulate the demand side. And in that, okay, there is a part that is market-driven, that stays with the operators. I think this morning as well, we listened to the factors that were mentioned that can be key in for take-up, like convergent offers, and in particular combined with content, but something that at least when it comes to ex-ante regulation, is not in the remit, and I don't think will be. But this is more for the business choices of the operators. But there is also I also listen to the need to ensure predictability, and when it comes also in particular to the migration from copper, and this is something that we discussed yesterday. The importance of predictability was also the reason why the Commission in the white paper had indicated a recommended date for the copper switch off. We got feedback on that, and this is something on which we are still reflecting based on the feedback that we got to the white paper. So I think these are the key points, and then happy to continue the discussion as well.
Thanks a lot. Robert, what's your reaction to the first initial statements?
Well, I actually see, strangely enough, communality here. I hear a number of people saying we want to keep ex-ante regulation, and I think I would agree with that. I hear people say, yeah, but the world has moved on, and we should change the framework. And I can also agree to a large extent with that. But what has happened over the last few years with fiber rollout is that in the past there was one copper network, and that was kind of owned by the former incumbent telecom operator. With fiber, we have seen the coming into being of many networks, regional networks, sometimes a local network, sometimes there is a version of network competition happening in Europe at the moment. Not just access seekers that want to use the copper network, but actually competitors that have their own network. That kind of competition is still relatively fragile in many countries. In some countries, it's networks that are in different regional areas. That's one. In other member states, it's actually competition for the same customers because there are 2 or 3 networks in the same street. And that is, I think, what has changed. And we as regulators need to regulate that situation. And I say it's relatively fragile, that kind of competition, because if we deregulate in a too simplistic a way, that kind of competition will fail, and we will remonopolize the market, if you see what I mean. And there are differences between the types of ex-ante regulation you're looking for, the types of access, and the market has changed. And we shouldn't forget that, because in the end, you want to have the best regulation to offer customers choice and to have some competition in the market in order to keep everyone honest. So it is, how do we react to the changing dynamic in the market? And from my experiences and from my discussions and from what I see happening in the market, it is not that easy how you go about that and what is the best solution. And just saying there is competition, deregulate, I think would be too easy and too simplistic. I also heard your statement about information gathering. The reason why I think that is actually becoming more important is because in the vision that I have is that we deregulate absolutely where we can, but that we get tools to intervene relatively quickly if we see something going wrong. The only way we can do that as regulators is if we know what is happening in the market, if we know what the data tells us. And that is, I think, the reason why I would say don't hamstring our ability to figure out what is happening in the market, because in the future, deregulation probably depends on us being able to intervene where we see a bottleneck appear. Because if we have to do a market analysis, a market definition, a market analysis, that takes 3-4 years. So it's better to do something, to have a regulatory environment where we can intervene less, but if we need to, quickly.
Thanks a lot. Having 2 panelists from France, we agreed that it might be an interesting thing to delve a bit more into the example of France, to take a look how it stacks against the rest of Europe. Ingrid, you would like to share a bit your thoughts about French example, what has worked well, what improvements can be?
Well, French is undeniably a success story for fiber. But unfortunately, we are not sure that the regulatory model on which it was built is exportable to other countries, although we would love to. But I think in France, the regulatory choices were made at the right time. That is before everything was deployed. I mean, so both the regulator, ministries, operators also were on the same line that, okay, let's invest together on a agreed model with agreed different operational modalities, and it worked. So it works also because, I mean, there is a regulatory, of course, I mean, legal basis to do that. That was put also in the European Code, and well, I think it was made at the right time. That is before everything was deployed. So now, in that Fibre is deployed in other countries, unfortunately, to reproduce exactly the same model would be difficult. But still, we think that there are some key positive takeaways from the French model that is interesting to try to have in other countries, and in particular co-investment. We very much believe in co-investment. We think it's the best way to avoid inefficient overlap of networks, the best way to fill up fiber networks, which is at the end what we all want. And that is something that we still think is valuable to be pushed even by policy, by regulation. So, I mean, there was in the code this article about deregulation in exchange of commitments on co-investment. We think it makes sense. I mean, maybe it was not so used. It was basically almost used in Italy. I mean, it was used, in fact, in Italy. It didn't go until the end of the procedure, but
the only one.
yeah, but I think the logic,
but
the logic makes sense. I mean, to have once you have a co-invest model with long-term rights, contracts signed, then the regulation makes sense. So there is a logic in that.
Pascal, is there something that you would like to complement on the French model? But we also agreed with you that you will expand a bit the scope of the analysis and apply to other countries as well.
Yeah, okay. First, yeah, I largely even fully agree with Ingrid. The French model has a very positive result, which is to avoid overbuild. And that's something that nobody can deny. Okay, everything is not perfect. You know, I told you at the beginning that there is not one model fitting for all. And it's a little bit bureaucratic sometimes, this model. And there is also a question with this model, which is the way it is implemented. And by the way, I think it's a generic question for NRAs all around Europe. Because we have one code, but we have 27 ways of implementing it. And even in France now, we see symmetric regulation, which is something quite positive. We see that the NRA is sometimes implementing it in a different way according if you are free, if you are SFR, or if you are Orange. And normally it's symmetric. That means everybody should be submitted to the same rules. So this is something that should be taken into consideration. And of course, it's one of the weaknesses of this regulation. And it's a weakness in general of all kinds of regulation. When there is too much room of maneuver, you see in Europe very different situation. In Spain, if we would apply the same criteria in Spain as in France, France should be fully deregulated or almost fully deregulated. So it's this discrepancy, and it's with, you know, we are present in 7 member states, and we are both incumbents and access seeker. So I think we have a quite balanced approach because we are experiencing the two situations. I believe, frankly speaking, that this difference between ex-incumbents and access seeker will progressively disappear because, as you mentioned, everybody is building out his own network. We are no longer at the time of the one monopolistic copper network. We have now several fiber networks, either through co-investment, co-financement, or co-financing, sorry, or because there is overlap. But anyway, we have seen this situation. And it's also the reason why we believe that in order to avoid this discrepancy, which is very difficult, simplification of the current rules, deregulation to a certain extent, and I believe that there is a need to maintain a kind of safety net or whatever, a tool to intervene if there is a problem. But the question is, shall we intervene when there is no problem? And here we see that sometimes there is intervention which is, according to our views, not justified. And this is what should be cleaned up with this new framework that we are expecting. And regarding the, just I wanted to react with what you said before regarding the code. You know, the code was, of course, adopted, I know because I was in the council at the time, in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, but it was prepared much in advance by the Commission. I mean, so we have rules which have been elaborated mainly at the time when most of the countries were with copper. And Mr. Breton said himself that we are no longer at the time of copper and that there is a need to update. And you know that even if it starts with a proposal of the Commission by the end of 2025, what we are expecting with the DNA, I mean, the time it will be negotiated between the Council, first by the Council and the Parliament, and then that there will be an agreement, I hope it will go fast, but I cannot imagine that things will move before 27, 28. It depends, and of course it will also depend on the tools, the legislative tools. If we have a regulation, of course, it can be implemented quite quickly. But if we continue with directive as we had in 2018, it will take even more time to be transposed in member states. So I think there is indeed a need to update, and I have the feeling that we all agree that there is a need to update. Robert, you told it. There is certainly a slight difference between I would say, the magnitude of this update.
Thanks a lot. Francesco, when we listen all this debate, what should be the FTTH Council Europe position on what are the main arguments that we should put forward to ensure that the regulatory framework is the best for the FTTH rollout and adoption?
I think we all agree that fiber has brought a lot of competition in the market. The fiber environment is quite competitive. It's not competitive everywhere, not in every corner of every member state, but there is a lot of more competition than there was before. This has not made the copper networks much more competitive. Copper networks are still monopolistic, and there is a lot of market power still linked to copper networks, in particular in countries where the migration to fiber is very slow. So this is the main attention we have to point to when discussing about the regulation. Because at the very end, it's easy for someone owning a 100% coverage of a copper network to use this market power to reduce competition in fiber. So this is why I think that while the Commission is thinking to the new Digital Networks Act that I understood is expected in a first draft version by the end of the year, if I understood properly, this is the right moment, even if a little bit in advance, to express our wishes to the Commission for Christmas. No? And the first one is that not only take a direction on copper switch off, if this has to be a policy option, if this has to be mandatory, or whatever it is relevant to the objective of increasing the take-up rate, but also that they provide the NRAs with powers to intervene on this matter. Because, for instance, when we look at the opportunities of an incumbent controlling both copper and fiber networks, today he can decide to switch off the copper network only in areas where they have fiber and not in areas where there is fiber from competitors. How long can we go on this way? For instance, Open Fiber built a very huge network with public funds in so-said white areas. And of course, the incumbent has no incentive to switch off copper in those areas because they're going to lose their customer, and these customers are going to move on Open Fiber, which is a state-owned network. We just manage it. It's not our ownership. But can we let the incumbent take this decision against the public interest that there may be to go in that direction? So I wish that the Commission would face these questions and provide some answers on the direction to go. Also, the issue of pricing is not relevant. The case I made about Italy talks for itself. So we need a framework to drive Europe from a copper environment to a fiber environment, and I think that the regulation should also be linked to that. What I really would like to see is something that the evaluation of the regulation is postponed after a copper switch off has occurred. And when you have probably a much more competitive environment, because what we're seeing on fiber is promising, and so it's probable that we will have better conditions for the regulator after all of this process of migration has occurred. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everyone, for these insightful perspectives. And now let me turn to you and bring you in the conversation, because that's really where the real magic and the real value of such a dialogue happens. It's not only what we discuss here on the panel, but the dialogue and the discussion what we create with you. Whether you are, yeah, I see already Eve is standing up. If you could present yourself briefly when you ask a question.
Everybody knows him.
It's been quicker than the mic.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Yves Blondel. I'm a specialist regulatory consultant, telecom regulation. I was also a co-founder of a fiber company in the early days focused on B2B markets. And I would like to talk about the theme of simplification, which was mentioned by Lucrezia Bussa and also by Pascal Hogar, I think, and maybe by Robert as well, right? When I was part of the founding team and we were raising money for a fiber company, we told the investors and the other board members that there's a regime characterized by significant market power, that we were a small startup, that we would be very happy to reach a position of significant market power, but that would be really pretty unlikely or very far away, etc. So the implicit promise to the investors of a fiber company was that there would be no economic regulation on its activities. Because the SMP regime is that if you're dominant, you will be subject to economic regulation. So when we are talking about new concepts that honestly remain a bit unclear and that are not the SMP regime, forms of symmetric regulation, and what we hear about that is not all that clear, the discussion on bottlenecks raised by the BEREC chairman, etc., I think that instills a lot of fear in fiber owners and fiber network owners, because simplification or something symmetric of which we don't know what it is, or rapid intervention powers or stuff like that, kind of breaches the implicit contract that we had, that we understood that we were not going to be the ones subject to economic regulation. And of course, if we were to behave awfully or control a particular bottleneck and refuse to provide wholesale or provide non-fit for purpose wholesale, I can understand that, but we have seen, notably in Denmark, a multi-SMP notification that was cleared by the Commission. So when companies became large, and met the significant market power threshold, then it is possible for NRAs under the current framework to address those new companies. And that has nothing to do whether it's a copper network or a fiber network. So I'm saying that if simplification ends up meaning that hundreds, if not thousands, of companies are subject to unpredictable forms of regulation, then you have a really serious problem with investors. And I'm putting that to you for your reactions, and I'm putting it as a message to the European Commission, like, be careful in terms of the signals that you give to investors, because this is your own talk to say that you need to offer good guarantees for investors, but if it means that a whole bunch of companies are subject to regulation suddenly, I'm not sure that that's understood as simplification from the perspective of those companies.
Thank you, Even. In a way, it brings back to the initial comment what we had, that there are people in the room who are scrutinizing everything what you are doing, right? Would you like to react to?
Yeah. So I guess the whole question boils to what we intend by simplification. And the idea is not that this simplification would translate into each and every company being regulated irrespective of the market circumstances and all of this. What we said since at the beginning was that we are in a situation now that is different from the situation that was there when first the regulatory framework was thought of, where we had a strong incumbents, that it was based on a historic monopoly and on the difficulty to replicate certain advantages. In most of the member states, in most of the markets, this situation has now changed to different degrees, and that is what we need to reflect and see and draw the conclusions from that. This does not mean that everyone that is in that market should and will be regulated. That's a different concept. Also, when it comes to symmetric regulation, this is something that it is in the code already, and that actually in some countries, like in France, was done since very, they started in 2010, if I'm not wrong, in the French market. So it's nothing new. The idea, it was, as the other panel members have explained, was to facilitate the deployment of infrastructures and possibly avoid the duplication. Whether this is a good or not a bad idea, I'm not entering into that, but this is not something that new that we are proposing now. It's something that has been done already in the past and that was in the code already. When doing so, of course, there is also a need to be proportionate in the remedies that are used by the NRAs, and this is a principle that is embedded in the European legislation and will always be there, and that's what also regulators apply. When we speak also about symmetric regulation, about GIA, this is a choice that we have done already some time ago, and again, is the result of the fact that we have seen how crucial it was access to civil infrastructures to facilitate deployment. That's where we are coming from. So all of this has been there already, is nothing new and nothing that would that constitutes a policy change. When we speak about simplification, what we mean is also to see at the different kind of remedies, how they have been applied, how successful they have been, whether the conditions that were there, and I appreciate that this is also what we are now researching on and what we are gathering evidence on, so I cannot really give any final conclusion on this, but what we are trying to understand is what conditions and what kind of remedies were particularly successful in terms of facilitating the deployment of infrastructures, and what was not either not so used or not so effective to the final policy aim, that is to facilitate the deployment of connectivity. This is the reasoning behind the simplification when it comes to what we mean. Any policy choice, and as I said at the beginning, is supported by evidence. And this is at the stage where we are, and that's welcome also the discussion that we are having here today, because that allows also to exchange views and gather different insights into the different markets.
Thanks a lot. Do we have any other question from the audience? Yeah, there is one here and then one over there, and then yeah, I think there was just on the left side. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I'm Eka from Georgia National Communications Commission. Just what I wanted to refer to the discussion what we had now here. Actually, Georgia is not EU member state, but still we are following and transposing all of the regulation, following them when making market analysis and working on framework. Regulation framework. And what I wanted to mention is that in Georgia we do not have a copper network anymore. It is very minor share already, and what we have, it is quite good development of fiber network in the country. Quite high penetration we have, and what I wanted to highlight is that incumbent, as it was on a copper network, is not valid to say so anymore for fiber networks. In our case, a former incumbent operator is the second player, and we very recently made market analysis, and the largest player was is the to say it's a not incumbent operator, and it was defined as a significant market player. And just what I want to mention is that it was, we estimated its market power and not the not looking at the players who were distributed in different geographic areas, so that we have number of small players also on fiber network, but it was not definitely subject of regulation, but the market power, what had the largest operator, the possibility of abuse of dominant position, and that was made, what made to form our framework of regulation. So that's, to say so, quite specific what have poor fiber markets where there is no fiber, no copper networks anymore. Just maybe it's comment and not question to the panelists.
Thanks indeed for bringing your perspective into this debate as well and widening the geographical scope of the discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Eric Masarczyk, Deutsche Glasfaser. So the largest alternate operator building fiber in Germany. From our perspective, drawing the picture of full deregulation or symmetric regulation means you draw the picture that all operators have the same swords. But as an alternate, I can say we have not a bunch of customers from the old history, and that's the sign what you draw in as a picture for the market. So I would say, and I would really recommend, as is also figured out, that we stay on the currently market, that we have a market 1 and market 2. Otherwise, we draw the picture that everyone is the same and similar. And also when it's mentioned that, the NIA can adapt the situation, we also now get the experience maybe from Malta, where the regulator did a decision and we get a veto by the European Commission. So I would say, what is your sign of certainty and predictability of regulation? Thank you.
Who would like to take up?
I guess I can
It's up to you.
at least start, and then maybe the others can also contribute. Just on the latest point, or on the veto, indeed there was a veto for Malta, but there were also other cases that concern, and I think, for instance, there were cases on the broadcasting market that were approved by the Commission when the NRA believed that there was a need to regulate broadcasting markets and imposed remedies on these markets, and the Commission accepted and approved this kind of decisions. So, as I was saying, it's a matter of shifting the burden of proof. It is true, but it still gives predictability when it comes to the criteria that are used. That's as far as from the Commission perspective I can say. I don't know if anyone else wants to add.
We as BEREC were against that veto from the Commission, but that's a discussion of another day. I hear you, and I don't think that as BEREC what we are saying is we want to regulate more. We are looking at a situation where we want to deregulate if a market is consistently competitive. In other words, if the competition has embedded itself in the market and it can stand on its own 2 feet, we are the first ones to say, let's deregulate. And that is for good reasons, because if competition in the market is stable, then that market will take care of it and we can withdraw. What I was saying earlier was that the only real lasting bottleneck that I can see in the distant future is probably only passive infrastructure, because the incumbent tends to own all the poles and ducts in the country, and that is probably one piece of a lasting bottleneck. And the other thing that I said is, instead of just looking at black and white, is there competition in the WLE market, the market one? Can you deregulate in a more clever way, in a staged way, in a sense? So I'm not saying that we have to re-regulate, and to echo what, or to answer what Yves said, don't misinterpret what I said as saying I want to regulate lots of players. But what I will say is, if one of those players that you mentioned becomes a monopolist in a particular area, then that could potentially, and I'm not saying that it will, but it could potentially also have a negative effect depending on how that operator acts. What I was saying is, I rather than not have to go through, I'd rather be able to deregulate and intervene quickly, rather than having to do an SMP notification for that one operator or for all the operators in the country, and then on the basis of that SMP notification intervene. So I was actually trying to say is there a cleverer way where we can deregulate but can intervene quickly if something were to go wrong than the other way around? So I would definitely be on the deregulatory mindset, but only if I can see that the market will keep itself competitive. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Robert. We have covered such a wide range of topics during the panel that before we end, I would like to invite all of you maybe to give to the audience one final thought, one final idea, I don't know, one final takeaway, if you wish, for us to leave the room with a certainty and clear idea what we take from this. And let's start in the reverse order as we kicked off. Pascal, maybe you want to start?
Yeah, maybe what can be done is to transform drag report regarding the part dedicated to legislation, to telecom, into legislation.
Ingrid, what would be your takeaway?
I mean, I hear that there is a kind of consensus that ex-ante regulation has worked, is working, and is continue to work, and will continue to work. And that would be my takeaway. And I'm confident that the Commission will, keep this as effective as possible.
Francesco, on your side, what's the takeaway?
I just summarize that all we want for Christmas is copper switch off.
Robert, on your side.
Gosh, if I can do one thing, is especially in this whole discussion about the new framework, keep the facts in mind. Regulate on the basis of hard facts, not on the basis of Christmas wishes or what you would love to see, but hard facts, please.
Thanks a lot. Lucrezia, I believe even Santa Claus doesn't get yet the letters from kids for Christmas, but you already get a Christmas wish list. What's your takeaway?
Yeah, I think the first takeaway is that I should be extremely careful on whatever I say. But more seriously, indeed, I think I will go along the lines of what Robert said, that on our side, what is important is to be consistent with the policy aim, that is to say, to ensure a high-capacity connectivity, secure, resilient, and sustainable, and to do so in an evidence and fact-based way.
Thanks a lot. And thank you, everyone. It's been a real pleasure to have a discussion today. Let's give a big round of applause to our audience.